Hey guys, today on JD Cars, we're installing dual electric exhaust cutouts on a 5.7 liter HEMI V8 Jeep. So as you can hear right now, this is probably the quietest V8 you've ever heard. Jeep has it limited, so it's very quiet. The mufflers are extremely restrictive. So we're gonna be changing that today with some electric exhaust cutouts. We'll get the car up on some jack stands and we'll get started right now. Now, because this is somewhat of a custom build, I do want to give you a rundown of all the parts. For a dual exhaust vehicle, you're going to need 2 exhaust cutout sets, 2 collector flanges for the diameter of your exhaust, 2 45-degree elbows, also for the diameter of your exhaust, and lastly, a Y-splitter, which Evil Energy offers for dual cutout systems. By the way, the cutout kits I'm using are Evil Energy cutouts. These are the cutouts I have on my vehicle, and I love them. So the first step here is going to be to slide onto the car with one of your cutouts and a Sharpie. And you'll need to figure out where you're going to be placing your cutouts. I'm right behind the rear differential here. You can see the mufflers on either side here. So we can place the cutout anywhere in front of the muffler. Now you want to test out placing the cutout in a location where it's not going to make contact with the ground going over bumps, but it also needs to be low enough that it's not going to melt your bumper or any electrical components. So once you've found a placement that makes you happy, you can take a Sharpie and trace all the way around the outside. That way when you remove the exhaust from the car, we'll know exactly where the cutout needs to go. So first step to removing the exhaust, come under the back of the car here, and we're going to be disconnecting these exhaust isolators from the exhaust hangers. You can see this one on the left side and this one on the right side, which I've already disconnected. You can use a flathead screwdriver, a crowbar. I found success with this piece of 1/2-inch square stock. These guys really can be a nuisance, so if they're giving you a hard time, you can use a little bit of WD-40. Just be persistent and don't give up. Now come up to the front half of the exhaust here, and we're going to remove 4 13mm nuts, 2 located on each exhaust pipe. I find it helpful to use a socket extension and a flex adapter. So even my 450 foot-pound impact wrench couldn't get this off. So we're gonna use the blowtorch to heat it up, and hopefully that will loosen it up. Alright, so this nut is absolutely seized on here. It's pretty rounded off and stripped. I've just about given up on getting it off, so I think I'm just going to cut it, drill out the stud, and install a bolt in place when we reinstall the exhaust. The next step is removing a 13mm bolt at the back of the exhaust. You can see it hidden all the way up here. Once you remove both of those from the rear of the car, come up here and remove both the red exhaust isolators from both sides. You can either pop it off the hanger or simply use a 13mm socket to remove the 2 bolts and drop it from the car. Okay, wow, so I lied. Removing those 13mm bolts in the rear here does not release the exhaust from the car. Fortunately, this hanger cannot be removed by simply unbolting it. So I really didn't have the patience to film this process, but basically you have to remove an 8mm screw right here, a couple T20 screws holding on the heat shielding, and then remove a couple metal clips holding on the lower plastic bumper, which will then expose the muffler, and it will also give you access to the hanger right here, which we have to remove, which will finally release the exhaust from the car. Wow, I hate exhaust hangers. Oh my gosh. Finally. Okay, so we finally have this muffler down. I'm gonna grab something to support it while we're taking off the other side, and then we're gonna drop it down to the ground carefully and slowly. Okay, finally, here we go. There we go. The only thing holding it on should be those studs. Yep, so if we just slide it back, it'll drop down and we'll have the exhaust in our hand. Okay. I'm so amped I got this out. Oh my god. Alright, it's 11 o'clock at night. I've got school tomorrow, so I'm probably gonna have to call it a night for now. But at this point, all we have to do is make our cuts, weld in our cutouts, throw the exhaust back in the car, install the valves. Okay, never mind. We actually have a lot to do. Yeah, we got the exhaust out and we're making progress, so that's what matters. I decided while the hardware store is open that we should deal with cutting these out and then going to the hardware store to get some bolts to replace them. Actually went very smoothly. Both of the studs popped out very easily, and now we can just grab some bolts to match up. So we now take our exhaust cutout, line it up with our pre-existing lines that we made while we were under the car. Now we've finished drawing in all of the lines, so we have a nice clean outline to mark our cut. So that does a nice job of showing us exactly where we need to cut. I'm going to replicate the same thing on the other side. Now with the holes marked, we'll be using a pneumatic die grinder and a cutting disc, as well as an electric angle grinder and a cutting disc to make those cuts. So surprisingly, I was actually able to make the entire cut just using the electric angle grinder. Should be able to just pull this off like so. So at this point you should be able to see that our cutout piece is going to come in right like this. Obviously we have a little bit of grinding to get it to fit perfectly, but this is a pretty good fit so far. So lining up the cutout here in the two corners, you can see this fitment is really nice. So I'm going to clean up these edges in preparation for welding, and then we can tack it up and weld it on there. Alrighty, both the exhaust cutouts are welded on. They're both really seamless, and I'm happy with the fitment. We'll be painting them with Rust-Oleum high heat 2000 degree exhaust paint. It's important to paint them because if you leave the welds exposed, they'll rust very quickly. Alright, so both the exhaust cutouts are now painted with high heat exhaust paint. Because of the temperature outside, I am going to have to wait overnight for this to dry before we can install it in the car. So it's the following day here. I just pulled off the tape and both the cutouts are looking great. Now it's time to reinstall the exhaust on the car, and then we'll install the electric valves. So it's easiest if you first get the exhaust all laid out under the car. Then you can lift this end up, put the studs into the holes. That will hold it in place. And then we can work at the back of the vehicle to resecure the hangers in the rubber isolators. When reinstalling the exhaust on these rubber isolators, it's advisable to spray a little bit of WD-40. It'll help you out a lot. Okay, so we got the muffler hangers reinstalled on both sides, as well as these two hangers. Now we'll head back up to the front. Now we have to reinstall these two hangers on either side. Now with those reinstalled, we can reinstall these spring nuts, as well as the new hardware that we got for that manifold. Okay, the exhaust is entirely back on, new hardware and all. Before I put the electric valves in, I just want to take care of reinstalling the rear bumper, so I'll see you then. Okay, the lower rear bumper is reinstalled. Now the very last thing I have to do before I can install the electric valve has to do with the exhaust angle here. If I just install the valve right here, the exhaust is going to be coming out and it could potentially melt some plastic parts in this area. So we're going to use this 45-degree elbow and we're going to fabricate a little deflector. So we'll figure out an angle we like. We'll put in the 3-bolt exhaust flange here and we'll weld it up. That way we can bolt this on to deflect the exhaust from melting the bumper. Alright, so these are welded and painted. Just to give them a little bit longer, we can begin the mounting process of the electric valves. So we'll be using this included hardware, as well as these gaskets and those deflectors that we just welded up. So pretty simple, take your gasket, slide it on over the hardware, and then do the same with your valve. Then the same with the gasket for your deflector, and finally the deflector itself. Now because we'll be using serrated lock nuts, we won't need to use any lock washers. We can simply go ahead and install it right on the flange. Awesome. Okay, now with both of these installed, all there's left to do is install the control box. So each valve comes with its own control box and wireless controller, but because we want to control the two valves simultaneously, we have a wide splitter here, so we'll only have to use one control box and one controller to control both valves at the same time. Now because I don't want to run any wires into the cabin, we're going to be chopping off this cigarette lighter connector. We'll simply be splicing into a power supply. Now because we cut this off and it houses a fuse, we'll be adding an inline fuse just to prevent any electrical issues. Now the very last thing before we install the control box in the car is waterproofing. Now this is definitely a crude method of doing so, but I have some heavy duty rubber mechanic gloves, so we'll be taking 3 of these, putting them over the control box, and then we'll secure this part with some zip ties. Yeah, this might be a crude method of waterproofing your control box, but it's a whole lot better than water shorting out the board and you having to replace it. So now the plan is to use some splice connectors here to connect both the positive and negative leads to the control box. I've decided I'll be splicing into the trailer light power supply because that has a constant 12 volts. These wires are easily accessible if you pull back a little plastic sheath. So using these splice connectors couldn't be much easier. You simply slide it over the wire you want to tap into. Then we'll be putting our control box wires into the second hole and using some pliers to crimp down the connection. So these connections are all nice and tightly taped up with electrical tape. Now I'll take the cable coming from the control box, plug in our Y splitter, and we'll connect both the cutouts. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. Whew, look at that. Not one, but 2 working electric exhaust cutouts. So now we'll take a moment to mount up our control box and get all these wires out of the way. I'll be doing so with zip ties, and then we'll get to see what this sounds like. Now it's time for a proper cold start with the exhaust valves open so we can finally hear what this V8 sounds like. give it a couple minutes to warm up here, and then we'll give it some revs. Now I'll try to go grab some acceleration clips so you can hear what it sounds like pulling away, as well as when it's driving by. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this custom exhaust cutout build. Be sure to leave a like below and also subscribe if you're interested in seeing more Jeep content, because Christian is looking into some serious off-road mods for his Grand Cherokee. I'm also very excited to announce that we now have a very large selection of JD Cars merchandise, including this custom embroidered flex fit hat, custom embroidered knit hats, poly cotton short sleeve t-shirts, which are extremely soft, long sleeve t-shirts with the full size logo, also long sleeve t-shirts with the smaller JD Cars pocket logo, as well as short sleeve t-shirts with the JD Cars pocket logo. And of course we also have classic hooded sweatshirts with the full-size JD Cars logo. Now all merchandise is offered in a variety of sizes and colors, so you can make your favorite combination between the red, blue, or black logo on the colored garment of your choice. So if you're interested, be sure to check out jd-cars.com, where you can find all the new JD Cars merch. Also, place your order soon, because only the first 100 orders will receive a free JD Cars sticker in the color of their choice. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on JD Cars.